Good morning, folks, and welcome to another great edition of Money Truth Moments with our very own Money Truth expert, Judy Copenbarger. How are you, Judy?
I am awesome. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I've been looking forward to Tuesday as usual. I see that you always have the perfect background, beautiful bouquet of flowers right next to you, and it's a beautiful day, right?
It's a great day. Yeah.
Folks, if you're just joining us, welcome to the show. Please make sure you're following Judy at judycopenbarger.today. Today, we have another great subject that I should actually say, and we're going to be talking about should you rent versus or should you buy, right? That's a big question right now in the market because it's fluctuating, right? We were just discussing off stage just how crazy some of these home prices are going. Some are great, some are just like, wow, I never in a million years, right? But today we get to focus on that. So I'm glad that you guys are joining us. So what do you say we get started, Judy?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
So let's start with the obvious. Why is the rent versus buy debate so important in today's economy?
Oh, I think it's important in every economy, especially folks, that are either rebooting, rebuilding, or just starting out. Wanting to get into that place and have your own dirt and be able to put up pictures and not worry about the holes in the walls, in a rental. So it's always important. But I think right now it's really timely because people that want to buy for the last 3, 4, 5 years, they're trying to figure out where they can do that. Right. And on the coast, it's even worse. Here we are in California, and it's amazing, the skyrocketing prices. And there's a lot of economic reasons for that we could get into. There's the interest rates, they're not falling like we thought they might. There's no supply out there. And of course, that drives up demand because there's so few, options. So, if the question is always, should I rent or should I buy? How long should I rent? Will I save up? Should I get a bigger down payment together, before we make the move to save on the interest? All of those questions are very big questions in recent years, for sure.
And you being an expert in dealing with a lot of folks, right? Not only on the business aspect of it, but on the personal side. What have you seen are what emotions are often influencing house decisions more so than logic?
Emotions. That's not a driver ever financially, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's a big deal because there's that American dream of owning your own home and having your own place, and nobody tells you what to do when you're in there, and you don't worry about, are they going to sell the place, and now I don't have I have to move real quick, or something's not going to work out with the neighbors, and I don't have control over that. So there are all those things. I mean, emotions are always at the heart of that. And for, young kids or young, couples, wanting to get into their first place, you want to be adulting, and there's something very adulting about having your own place. And so sometimes people rush into home ownership, particularly if it's going to be your residence. They kind of rush into it before they're financially ready. It's easy to do that. Kind of want to jump the gun. I don't want to wait 6 more months. I want to get in there and hang my curtains, right? So there's all that emotional stuff. And then all the stuff we bring with us from childhood, what we learned about money, what we learned about home ownership and real estate from our parents, the conversations that we overheard, even if it was subliminal, we were taking in this. And when we heard conversations about paying the mortgage and paying the rent and paying the tax, was it an emotional, was it a charged conversation with stress and anxiety in it? Or was it a peaceful conversation about, hey, the mortgage is due, let's take care of that? Right. So all of that stuff we bring with us to these conversations makes it very emotional at times. And then you've got couples that didn't grow up in the same household, right?
Right.
Usually. And so they have different values about money and ownership and what that looks like. How much should we save? When should we buy? Should we buy it all? I had a couple the other day in their 40s. He never wants to own anything, and she really wants to have a nest and own a home. And it's interesting to me how so many people don't really care about, why would I own when I can just live where I want and move when I want?
Yeah.
And there's an emotional attachment to those values too. So it's interesting when you try to blend all these values together, how charged those conversations can be. And I get to be on the front row and navigate some of these, right? It's like, hey, you on the play. You can't
Yeah.
say
No, and these are totally great points that you bring up because it also, it's sometimes we don't realize. So that how can these decisions affect like someone's long-term financial freedom, right? And that's something we don't really talk about or really look at. So what would you say to something like that?
Yeah, well, when you're talking about long-term obtaining wealth, acquiring wealth, transferring legacy wealth, things like that, generational wealth, real estate is a big part of a lot of those things. There's life insurance that can be carried down. We talked about that with some of the wealthier families in the country historically. They use life insurance for that. Carnegie's, a lot of these big big family names that you would know that turned into big giant companies. And so real estate can really happen, especially if you look at, we were just talking off camera about a little house that's selling for 700,000. They probably bought it for 35 or 50 years ago. They've been in there all these years. Well, if you did that with more parcels and more parcels and more parcels, let's say you bought every 3 years, you bought a property as a rental, little something. By the time you do that over 20 or 30 years, that's a lot of property. By then, everything's paid off and you've got all this cash flow. That's generational wealth, right? And the accumulation and the value increases there. Plus, there's tax plays with home ownership, with real estate ownership. So there's all kinds of good reasons for real estate to be part of almost everyone's portfolio. And if you live in a house and you have to pay money every month to be there anyway, we have a family farm, so it's kind of easy on some of the kids, but not everybody has access to a place to stay for free or for very little. And so you've got to pay money every month anyway. Should it be going into building equity or should it be going into something a little bit more temporary? That's the question.
Yeah. The other thing is it's when you're talking about renting, and there's always the good, the bad, and the ugly, like you just said earlier today, between the renting versus the buying. I think also when you look at buying, especially in today's age, right? I don't think people realize, and this is a question I think that comes up. So, what are the real costs associated with home ownership beyond the mortgage? And I don't think we really think about that. We just think, oh, it's a mortgage and that's it. But guess what? Surprise here, surprise there, and all that. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, long term, the mortgage cost, the monthly ticket, that you're paying for the principal and interest is going to be about half of what it costs you to be there. That's a pretty conservative estimate. So if you can afford a $2,000 mortgage, you better be able to have 4,000 available if something happens. And the other costs that show up, they don't always show up, monthly. You're going to have taxes. That's going to be due, a couple times a year. You can pay it once. You're going to have forced insurance, especially if you have a mortgage. You have to insure this place. There's going to be maintenance. So a roof doesn't last the whole time you're going to be there, probably, right? Doesn't last 50, 100 years. There's going to be roof. There's going to be patching. There's going to be plumbing that needs to be done, electrical. There's going to be, you have a seal in a window that leaks and now it's ruined your floor. You've got to fix the floor. There's things that need to be done outside. Sometimes plumbing goes bad between the house and the street. You don't think about that. You think about plumbing in the house, keep the pipes clean and rust free and all that stuff. But sometimes roots get in your pipes between the house and the curb. And that's an expensive process. So here you got $10, $12, $15,000 you didn't see coming. You don't get anything for it, but a front yard full of mud, right? And digging for a couple of weeks. So things like that happen. So if you just plan on having enough cushion every month where you kind of put money maybe into a slush fund for the house, when it's going to need new shoes or a new jacket or a new handbag, right? The house is going to need things. So when it does, you've got the money for that. You don't end up using credit or having to borrow equity to make sure that you're maintaining. You don't want to get behind. That deferred maintenance can really, really bite people. And it might impact their quality of life while in the house. But when the house is sold, then all these things, compromise what you can get for selling a house, the fair market price then. So you want to keep up with those things, and it takes money to do so. So sometimes people don't think about, they just want to get in there and own it and get the keys, right? But you got to make sure that it's affordable when you do it.
Folks, if you're just joining us, welcome to the show. And if you're not following Judy, please do so at judycopenbarger.today. Feel free to also drop us a line here while we're doing this live session with Judy and ask questions. Today we are focusing on rent versus buying in a home, and we've touched on a lot of key points. So make sure you share this out with the youngsters who are ready to buy, and even those that are in transition between homes as well too. You talked about credit. So what role does credit and down payment savings play in a big decision like this?
Oh, huge. It's huge. Of course, the more money that you put down in as an initial investment or down payment, the less you're going to borrow, which means your interest payments will be lower. And in an environment where interest is a little on the high side, and right now, for a lot of people, it feels like it's high because it was so low for so long, like kind of artificially low. It was like, wow, everybody's sitting on these 2.75%, 3%, 4% loans. Well, that's not normal. But a lot of people have them. That's part of why the supply is so small. Nobody wants to go take a 7% loan to move, right? So they're hanging on to those great mortgages. So when interest rates change, that will make a difference. I was going to say something else. What was the other thing? Interest rates?
Yeah, basically saving you
Oh,
in this decision, right?
yeah, the down payment. Yeah, you want to have enough. So you want to make sure that amount that you put down is going to reduce your monthly mortgage and all the things that go with that. That's the other point. I think I made the point.
You did, but
I
and
was
I
holding
appreciate
up
that.
2 weeks out in the sun. Maybe my brain got fried a little bit, but I'll keep up. I'll keep up.
So let me follow up with asking you, how can someone estimate really what they can truly afford in a rent versus mortgage, right? Two different animals for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting here in Southern California. Our environment is very similar, and we do business out in Texas too, and it's very similar. So what you're going to pay in rent is just about what you would pay in a mortgage. There's not a lot of big difference. So then you've got to weigh the other things besides just the cost of being there. If you own a home, you're going to get tax benefits from that because you're paying interest. You get part of that back, right, as a deduction. There are other costs associated with owning a home. If you live in it, it's one thing. If it's a rental, even better, right? In terms of deductions and the discounting that happens to that actual cost. So if you're looking at apples and oranges, the rent and the ownership are going to be two different things, but you've got to look at all of the other costs and all of the other deductions, the bottom line of the cost and benefits of being in that property. And that doesn't even count the value increase as the equity grows in the property. So there's a lot of factors to think about when you're looking at, should I buy, should I rent a little bit longer and save up more? That one hand, I'm throwing money down the toilet every month in rent. There's no value coming back for that. But the more that I save to put down on a down payment, the longer term savings is going to show it for me. So a
What would
lot
you,
of things to think about.
so what would you say is the best way to prepare not only mentally but financially before making this leap of faith, into something like that?
Well, I think in general, I would say wait longer than you think you need to before jumping in. And there's all the other things, people that I've seen that have regrets from ownership. They did it too soon, either financially too soon, and now they're sitting in an empty house going, I can't afford a kitchen table. We're living on cardboard boxes, and we've all done that. We've all moved in and slept on the floor the first night. It's like, oh, it's my floor, right? But there's something about doing it too soon that later you have a little regret. It's like, I can't take a trip. I can't go out and buy pizza. I can't do anything because all of my money goes to the mortgage and what I need to do to maintain this place. So that would be one example of doing something too soon. The other thing is people will buy and then 6 months later going, it's really not the neighborhood I thought. I never sat here at night at 10 o'clock at night to see what parking's going to be like before I bought. And now I live here and I'm stuck with it, right? Or the traffic or the noise or the airplanes going over, whatever it is, because you get so in a rush. So those are probably two big factors to consider. Make sure the neighborhood's right before you buy, because now you're there and hopefully you'll be able to move again and get out what you put in. But it doesn't always work with timing. So just take your time, more time than you think you need before pulling the trigger and buying. And I've heard from an expert many, many years ago, and I've repeated it a few times. I think it's worthy of repeating again. Fall in love with 3 properties. Don't fall in love with one. You don't have any negotiating power. Fall in love with 3. And then you always have options, and it puts you in a better position when you're thinking, oh, I've got, a backup plan, maybe even plan B, plan C, right? So I think that's worthy of repeating and sharing.
No, absolutely. That's a great point. Definitely hits home with that too. The other thing that I want to follow up with you, because you hit something that just dawned on me too, is I think sometimes we forget how to balance life, right? So, for example, you talked about, we get into these homes, and I'll give you a perfect example. For many years, when we started our journey, we bought our home, and everything was like, okay, we're not going to take a vacation because we're going to sink and replace this, or we're going to do this. And pretty soon you realize that a decade has gone by, and really everything is about the house, and there's no real balance between
Mm,
your life, your journey. Everything is house, house, house.
mhm.
And I think it's important, and you brought this up before, how to find that balance, right? Like to just keep a very um, a great life, in other words. So you have your roof over your head, but you also need time to do other things, just not work and house, work and house. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that just comes down to that ticket. In your example, maybe it was really important to get that house, get the equity going, to start building that wealth that will become generational wealth. That's a high priority. But if it feels like it was out of balance, maybe you could have waited a little longer, put a little more down, had a different house in a different neighborhood, may have been just as good or better. It's hard to know hindsight, right? You go back and go, well, I should have, would have, could have. There's so many things to think about, when you come to where are we going to live? What's it for? Especially when it's your home. There are a lot of factors to that. And, being able to have quality of life experiences. And the thing about that, I think a lot of us did that in our early years where the house, adulting, getting into our first place, that is a big chunk of every month's income. I mean, more than half, probably 60% maybe for a lot of folks here in Southern California, particularly. It doesn't leave a lot for the other stuff if you're going to have a cushion for the emergencies. There's not a lot for fun. But that's when you get to watch all the other videos that we've created on how to do everything on a shoestring or no money. The free stuff, making sure that you have experiences and you're not just sitting in there going, well, we have a TV. That's about it, right? You're having experiences and you're enjoying your community and enjoying all the free stuff that's out in your environment. You're doing staycations and loving it. So
Mhm.
a lot of it is just attitudinal. It's your perspective and creative ways of just finding that balance and celebrating what you have.
So I know we're getting closer to the end of the show, but I want to ask you one last question. Before we finish this, talk a little bit about what's one question everybody should ask before either renting or buying a home.
I think how will it impact not only my finances, but my quality of life? For example, yesterday I was talking to a client that wanted to buy a place, and one of them was a cottage down at the water, and one of them was the view condo up overlooking the ocean. Totally different experiences, different neighborhoods, different traffic, different maintenance, totally, a lot of things to think about besides just the price tag. They're very similar, the costs and tax, benefits and all of that, but very different experience. So I think just considering, what will life be like? Will it impact my ability to go out and get pizza if I want? Will it impact my ability to park or have company over or entertain or my ability to travel and do other things that I want to do that take money? How will it impact my life? You kind of like when I sit with clients, I say, let's try this on. Let's suppose we're 6 months out. We have this, this, and this. Here's what the budget looks like. Here's the spending plan. Here's what we have going out. Here's the tax benefits. And here's what life looks like in this neighborhood, in this spot. Would that really take your life up a notch or would it take it down? There's no neutral. Would it make life
Right.
better? Would it make life worse? And you look at all the aspects, fitness, wellness, financially, relationships, family. How will it impact all of these things in life that matter that are not just financial? And if you try it on and go, well, I'd have to give a little here, take a little there. That's how you try it on. And then you measure it in numbers. Scale of 1 to 10 always works, especially if there's 2 of you or more. 10 is optimal. Yes. 1 is, no, that really sucks. I don't like it. 5's in the middle, right? If you measure by 10 instead of words, like I like it, or that's good, or that I don't like that, or it's terrible. Well, it's terrible a 4 or a 7, right?
Right.
So it gives you a way to measure. So those are things that might be helpful as you're going through this decision making in your life. Should I rent? Should I buy? Is this the right time? Is this the right place? All of those things. Tools to help you.
Awesome, folks. And we are at the tail end of our show, so you know what that means. It's our Money Truth Challenge. So what do you got for us today?
Okay, so if you are getting ready to move, if you're getting ready to relocate or maybe thinking about getting into your first place, are we ready? Go through the grid of questions. Maybe listen back through some of the things that we discussed here, but go through the grid. Is it the right time? What would happen, worst case, if I waited 6 more months? What would happen financially? What would happen logistically with my work, with my spouse's work, with the family, schools, all of that, right? If you have littles, what would the impact be if I wait 6 months or if I do it now? Would I be in a better position, worse, or somewhere about the same? I really don't believe in neutral. It would either be better or worse. So just kind of go through those questions. Would it be better or worse? What would it look like? What would the impact be on all the other aspects of my life? What would the interest rates look like? Are they going to get better or worse, or is this really kind of a hot time? Do I want to stay in this location or find a totally different location? I think it makes sense to put on your list of, questions and vetting issues to say, what if I change locations? We always talked about this neighborhood, but what if there's a neighborhood within 5 or 10 minutes from grandma or from the school we went or the work? What if there's something really close that could be way better and we've never thought outside the box or looked there? Maybe get a realtor on your team that can help, broaden your search, give you some ideas. Go through all of these vetting things. Think outside of, oh, I drove by this house. I think it's perfect for us, honey. Let's put in an offer. Make it a little bit more intentional. I think that will help you and anyone that's considering renting continually or buying. That will make a difference.
All right, folks, there's your challenge for today. Please make sure that you tune in every Tuesday at 8 a.m. with the replays on Thursdays at 8 p.m. And as always, Judy, thanks for your wisdom and sharing. I think this has helped a lot of people right now, especially in transitions right now where they're looking for their first home and all of that too. Any last parting words?
No, it's my pleasure. And happy Mother's Day, belated Mother's Day to all of you moms out there. We love you and you guys are awesome. Have a great week.
Take care, you guys. Until next week.